From the very beginning, Michael Jackson never tried to hide how he felt about Diana Ross. His admiration for her was visible to the entire world, woven into his music, his private spaces, and the way he spoke about her in interviews. He once described her simply as everything you could wish for, and those words barely scratched the surface of what he actually felt. Those who were ever allowed inside his home knew just how deep that devotion truly ran. In a hidden room within his private sanctuary, every wall was covered with photographs of Diana, from her Supremes era to her most glamorous solo performances, capturing every version of the woman he could never stop loving. And at the center of it all, thousands of candles burned around her image, day and night, filling the room with a warmth that felt less like decoration and more like something sacred. It wasn't admiration in any ordinary sense. It was something closer to complete and total devotion. Michael had reportedly been told by an Obeah man in his youth that lighting candles around the image of someone he loved would keep that person close to him forever. He never forgot those words, and when it came to Diana, he took them to heart completely and without hesitation. That haunting imagery eventually found its way into his public art as well, with audiences at his concerts holding candles in unison, a shared invisible echo of something he had once done entirely in private. When Diana eventually married someone else, Michael tried his best to accept it and move forward with his own life. He dated other women, including Tatum O'Neal and Brooke Shields, and made efforts to appear content in public. But the shadow of Diana never truly left him. Songs like Remember the Time were later said by his brother Jermaine to have been inspired by her, a way of preserving a love that had slipped away, frozen forever in melody and kept alive in sound long after the moment had passed. Their story began in 1969, when the Jackson 5 signed with Motown Records. Michael was barely 11 years old at the time, but his voice and stage presence were already impossible to ignore. Motown founder Berry Gordy saw that spark immediately, and for publicity purposes, the label pushed the story that Diana Ross had personally discovered the Jackson 5. The full truth was more complicated, as it was actually Gladys Knight and Suzanne DePass who first recognized the family's extraordinary talent. Michael's age was even quietly adjusted for the spotlight, with him introduced publicly as 9 years old rather than 11. Still, whatever the official story said, Michael's connection with Diana became very real, very quickly, and it ran far deeper than any publicity narrative could capture. In 1969, he actually moved into her home and lived there for about a year, until his family fully relocated from Gary, Indiana, to Encino, California. During that time, he called her Mama, and sometimes, with a playful and affectionate smile, his girlfriend. His mother Catherine later recalled how deeply he adored Diana, sharing stories of him teasing his younger sisters LaToya and Janet, telling them warmly that they weren't truly pretty until they started looking like her. To Michael, Diana was more than a superstar. She became his mentor, his emotional anchor, and his steady guide through the overwhelming pressure of fame at such a young age. She gave him advice, supported him emotionally, and helped him navigate a world that could be isolating even at its most glamorous. As they spent more time together, his admiration grew into something that blurred the line between friendship and something far more intense. He saw her as the ideal woman, beautiful, talented, graceful, and almost untouchable. Their bond deepened significantly when they worked together on the 1978 film The Wiz, a bold reimagining of The Wizard of Oz featuring an all-black cast that was unlike anything Hollywood had produced before. Diana played Dorothy, and a 19-year-old Michael played the Scarecrow, innocent, curious, and full of heart. Their on-screen chemistry was immediately undeniable, but off-screen, something even more meaningful was forming between them. Diana had personally pushed for Michael to be cast in the film, insisting he was perfect for the role even when others around her had serious doubts. Their duet, Ease on Down the Road, became one of the film's most beloved and enduring moments, full of laughter, energy, and an effortless connection that felt genuine because, in many ways, it absolutely was. During filming in New York in 1977, rumors began to circulate widely. Diana had been invited to Michael's apartment one evening, and she stayed the night. The next morning, one of her assistants spent hours searching for them before finally discovering they were still together at Michael's place, with Diana showing no signs of having left. Stories like that only deepened the speculation surrounding them and kept the public wondering for years. At one point, Diana was even overheard joking with friends, saying that Michael was definitely not gay. When that same assistant later asked Michael directly what had really happened between them, he gave nothing away, offering only a shy smile and a quiet, careful response. "You'd have to ask her that." When the assistant turned to Diana with the exact same question, she gave the exact same answer without hesitation. "You'd have to ask Michael." That playful, deliberate back and forth only added to the mystery that would surround them for the rest of their lives. Michael never pretended his feelings were anything other than what they were. He kept photographs of Diana with him wherever he went, called her "my goddess Diana," and openly admitted to friends and journalists alike that he had fallen deeply in love with her. He later said plainly and without any embarrassment, "Diana was my first love." And first loves do not come without their share of pain. When he learned she was getting married, he was torn between genuinely wanting her happiness and being completely unable to ignore the hurt spreading through him. He admitted to feeling jealous, because a part of him had never stopped loving her and likely never would. In the mid-1980s, he believed his dream was finally becoming real. According to those close to both of them, Diana had promised to marry him and had even accepted his ring. At the Motown 25th anniversary special, and later at the 1984 American Music Awards, she was seen wearing it openly. At those same awards, Diana kissed Michael on the lips in front of the cameras, holding his face deliberately so the moment would be captured and seen clearly by everyone watching. Some believed it was more than a display of affection, that it was a conscious and public test of how the world might respond to what they were. Around that same time, they reportedly shared the news of their relationship with Katherine Jackson. Her response was immediate, fierce, and completely unforgiving. She told Diana she was far too old for her son and accused her of causing harm to him. Katherine then contacted reporters directly, pulling the story into the full glare of the public eye. What followed was swift and merciless. The press turned on Diana, using cruel labels and ridiculing the age gap with absolutely no restraint. Under that intense and suffocating pressure, Diana stepped away from the relationship. She ended the engagement and later entered into a relationship with Norwegian shipping magnate Arne Jr. For Michael, it felt like the deepest kind of betrayal. He had spent years completely devoted to her, pouring attention, gifts, and emotional energy into the dream of a future together. And in the end, she had chosen someone else entirely. Heartbroken and struggling to process the loss, he turned to music as he always did. The grief started as love songs, then softened into sorrowful ballads, and finally hardened into something much sharper and more raw. That anger and hurt became Dirty Diana. Early versions of the song were said to be even more emotionally charged than what the world eventually heard. The lyric "She likes the boys in the band" was not accidental or random. Diana had been publicly linked over the years to several famous musicians, including Lionel Richie, Barry Gibb, and Gene Simmons, while Michael still believed with quiet certainty that they were meant to be together. Despite the pain and the distance that grew between them, their connection never fully disappeared. Even at the absolute peak of his fame and power, his loyalty to her remained constant and unchanged. In 2002, when Michael signed his will, the world was struck by one quiet but deeply telling detail. If anything were ever to happen to his mother Katherine, Michael had named Diana Ross as the person he wanted to raise and care for his children. Out of everyone in his vast and celebrated circle, he chose her. Many who knew him believed it reflected something far deeper than trust alone, that in his heart, he had always imagined Diana as part of his family, the life he once dreamed of building and could never entirely release himself from. Diana, for most of her public life, remained largely silent about the true depth of what they had shared. She rarely addressed it directly, perhaps understanding how much controversy and scrutiny it could invite. But in 2019, following the release of the documentary Leaving Neverland and the wave of public criticism that followed, she finally broke that long silence. On social media, she posted a heartfelt and direct message saying she believed in Michael, and that to her, he had always been a powerful and inspiring force, not just in her own life, but in the lives of countless others. She ended with a line that immediately stood out: "Stop in the name of love." It was not merely a reference to her classic song. It was a deeply personal plea to the world to stop attacking someone she had known and loved since he was a small child. Her words felt genuinely different from the responses other celebrities were offering at the time. They carried no defensiveness, no political calculation. They felt grounded in history, in memory, and in decades of shared experience that few people could claim to understand. By 2025, at 81 years old, Diana began allowing some of that carefully maintained silence to soften. In quieter and more reflective interviews, she spoke about Michael not as a headline or controversy, but simply as a person she had known and loved. "He was Michael," she said, "and he was mine, in a way I never needed to explain." Then came the words that finally cracked decades of restraint and reserve. "I was crazy about Michael. I loved him a lot. He was my inspiration, a very gentle and wonderful human being. One of the special ones in this universe, and I don't even know if he knew how special he was. His aura was only about love." When others had called Michael strange or fragile or impossible to understand, Diana had always seen something entirely different. In one quiet and deeply honest reflection, she offered words that captured the full weight of everything they had been to each other. He wasn't broken. He was beautiful, just burdened. After everything they had shared across decades of love, loss, music, silence, and memory, that was perhaps the truest and most complete thing either of them ever said about the other.